I charged this guy $5,000 to audit his life. He told me he couldn't afford it. Then I watched him spend 6 hours on TikTok that same day. That's when I knew his problem wasn't money, it was math. Meet John, 32 years old, college degree collecting dust, bank account bleeding out. He came to me saying he wanted to be rich, but every morning he woke up and the first thing he did was grab his phone like a junkie reaching for his fix. I don't do motivation. I don't do pep talks. I audit broken systems. And John's operating system was running a virus called comfort addiction. In 7 days, I was going to delete that virus. But first, I needed to show him exactly how much his laziness was costing him, not in feelings, in dollars. By my calculation, John's procrastination habit was burning $127,000 a year in opportunity cost. He didn't believe me. That's because broke people are really good at one thing, lying to themselves about why they're broke. Welcome, I'm Mr. Wealth Fixing. This is the story of how I fixed a completely broken man in 1 week. I didn't use affirmations, I didn't use vision boards or shallow mindset tips. I only used cold, surgical precision. And I'm going to show you step by step everything I did to change John's life. But first, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Let's get started. Day 1. I walked into John's apartment at 7 a.m. He wasn't awake. Of course he wasn't. I found him in bed, phone in hand, already scrolling Instagram. He looked at me like a deer in headlights and said he was just waking up. Bull. He'd been awake for 40 minutes. His screen time report didn't lie. I asked him about his morning routine. He told me he didn't really have one. He just woke up naturally and went with the flow. That's addict language. When someone says they go with the flow, what they mean is they have zero control over their impulses. I pulled up his bank statements. John made $3,200 a month at a job he hated. After rent and bills, he had $890 left over. In theory, that's $10,680 a year he could invest. In reality, he had $247 in checking and $0 in savings. Where did it go? Frequent food delivery orders, online games, impulse purchases on the internet, monthly subscriptions he forgot he had, all fast dopamine purchases. John looked at me and said it wasn't that much. He said everyone spends money on food and stuff. I told him the difference between him and everyone else is that everyone else isn't paying me $5,000 to figure out why they're broke. He went quiet. I sat down across from him and explained the real problem. John didn't have a money problem. He had a dopamine regulation problem. His brain was a slot machine that paid out in tiny hits of pleasure, and he was feeding it coins all day long. Every scroll, every snooze button, every junk food order, every "I'll do it tomorrow," they all paid out an immediate comfort, and John's brain had learned that comfort was more valuable than cash. But here's the thing about comfort. It's expensive, and John had been paying the bill for 10 years. I did the math in front of him. If he'd taken that $890 a month for the last decade and invested it at a conservative 8% return, he'd have $163,000 right now. Instead, he had a drawer full of junk he didn't use and a PlayStation he played when he was too tired to work on his side hustle. John stared at the number. Then he said something that told me everything I needed to know. But I didn't know.
That's the lie. He did know. Deep down, every broke person knows. They just don't want to look at it. Because looking at it means admitting they've been trading their future for comfort. And that's a hard pill to swallow. I told John I was going to spend the next 7 days rewiring his brain's reward system. He asked me if it would hurt. I told him the truth. Only his ego. Day 2. I made John install a time-tracking app on his phone, not to monitor him, to make him monitor himself. I told him I wanted data, raw, unfiltered data on where his attention was going. He resisted. He said tracking felt too controlling and that he didn't want to become obsessed with productivity. I laughed. I told him that's what every addict says when you try to take away their drug. They call it freedom when it's really just slavery with better marketing. We sat down at his kitchen table. I asked him to tell me what his dream life looked like. He gave me the standard answer: financial freedom, travel, nice car, not worrying about bills. I asked him how much money that required. He guessed $10,000 a month. I asked him what skills he had that could generate $10,000 a month. He paused. He said he was working on it. That phrase, working on it. It's the adult version of "the dog ate my homework." I opened his laptop. His last login to his side project was 11 days ago. 11 days! I asked him where he'd been. He said he'd been busy with work and life stuff. I pulled up his screen time report again. 8 hours and 47 minutes a day on his phone.
He looked at the numbers and said it couldn't be right. He said it must be counting time when his phone was just sitting there. I showed him the app breakdown. Active usage. TikTok, 3 hours, 12 minutes. Instagram, 2 hours, 4 minutes. YouTube, 1 hour, 38 minutes. Twitter, 52 minutes. The rest scattered across games and random apps. John went silent. That's the moment. That's when the audit gets real, when you can't argue with your own data. I explained to him how his brain works using the evolutionary biology version. His brain was built 200,000 years ago to survive in a world where calories were scarce and predators were everywhere. It was designed to conserve energy and seek immediate rewards. That brain doesn't understand investing. It doesn't understand that spending 3 hours building a skill today will pay you $150,000 a year down the road. All it understands is rest now, eat now, pleasure now, survival mode. And here's the problem. John's environment was engineered to exploit that ancient brain. Every app on his phone was designed by teams of PhDs whose entire job was to hack his dopamine system. They A/B tested colors. They optimized notification timing. They weaponized psychology against him. And John thought he was just chilling. I asked him a simple question. If I paid you $20 an hour to scroll TikTok for 8 hours, would you do it? He said yes, obviously. I said, congratulations. You're currently paying $20 an hour to do it, except the money is coming out of your future. That's when I showed him the opportunity cost. Every hour he spent scrolling was an hour he wasn't learning a high-income skill, wasn't solving problems that people would pay him to solve. I pulled up a freelance marketplace. I showed him what people were charging for skills he could learn in 90 days. Copywriting, $5,000 per project. Video editing, $3,000 per project. Web design, $4,500 per project. These weren't unicorn skills. These were learnable, marketable, valuable skills. John could have mastered one of them in the time he'd spent watching strangers dance on TikTok this year. He got defensive. He said he was tired after work and needed to decompress. I told him that's another lie his brain tells him. A tired brain doesn't need stimulation. It needs rest. What he was doing wasn't rest. It was numbing. Day 3. I implemented the dopamine audit protocol. I made John write down every time he reached for his phone and what he was feeling right before. Not what he was thinking, what he was feeling. By noon, the list was full. Bored, anxious, lonely, uncomfortable, uncertain. Every single time he picked up his phone, he was running from a feeling. The phone wasn't entertainment, it was anesthesia. I asked him what he was avoiding. He said nothing. I waited. Silence makes people uncomfortable, and uncomfortable people tell the truth. After 2 minutes, he admitted it. He was avoiding the feeling of being behind, of wasting his potential, of watching everyone else succeed while he stayed stuck. So he scrolled to forget. But here's the cruel irony. Every minute he spent scrolling made him more behind, which made him feel worse, which made him scroll more. It was a debt spiral, except instead of owing money,
He owed himself a life.
Day 4. I deleted every social media app from his phone. He panicked. He said he needed them for staying connected and networking. I asked him to name the last meaningful connection he made scrolling Instagram at midnight. He couldn't. I gave him a replacement. Every time he felt the urge to scroll, he had to write down one thing he was grateful for and one action he could take in the next 10 minutes toward his $10,000 a month goal. No exceptions. He hated it. He said it felt forced and fake. I told him that's because his brain had been rewired to crave jump stimulation. This was withdrawal, and withdrawal is supposed to feel bad. That's how you know it's working. Day 5. John woke up early for the first time in years. Not because I forced him, because his brain wasn't fried from blue light and dopamine hits until 2 a.m. He told me he felt weird, clear but weird, like he'd been living underwater and suddenly surfaced. I asked him what he did with his morning. He said he went for a walk and then sat down to work on his project. For 90 minutes, uninterrupted, no phone, no distractions, just him and the work. He looked at me like he discovered fire. I told him this was what his brain was capable of when it wasn't being hijacked every 30 seconds. This was his baseline. This was the operating system he was born with before it got infected with digital crack. But we weren't done, because knowing what to do isn't the same as doing it. John's brain was going to fight back. It was going to whisper lies. Just 5 minutes won't hurt. You deserve a break. Everyone else does it. That's the virus talking, and we needed to build an antivirus.
Day 6. I taught John the $100 rule. Every time he wanted to do something that his old self would do, scroll, order food, hit snooze, skip a task, he had to ask himself, would I pay $100 right now to do this? If the answer was no, he didn't do it. Every lazy choice was a $100 bill thrown in the trash. I also made him track his micro wins. Every time he chose discomfort over comfort, he wrote it down. Didn't hit snooze, worked out, finished a task. Because the brain needs proof that the new system works. By the end of day 6, John had 23 wins on his list. 23 times he'd chosen his future over his comfort. 23 data points proving he wasn't lazy, he was just running the wrong program. Day 7. This was the day everything clicked. Not because John suddenly became a different person, but because he finally understood the game he'd been losing. I explained to him the rewire protocol. Here's how it works. First, the morning firewall. Most people grab their phone and inject themselves with other people's lives, problems, and agendas before they've even defined their own day. That's not a morning routine, that's a hijacking. I made John implement a hard rule. No phone for the first hour. Not on silent, off, completely off. Instead, he had 3 tasks: hydrate, move his body for 10 minutes, and write down his top 3 priorities for the day. That's it. No negotiation, no exceptions.
Second, the value hour. Every single day, John had to spend 1 hour building a monetizable skill. Not planning, not watching tutorials, building. Creating something that could be exchanged for money. 1 hour, non-negotiable. I didn't care if he was tired. I didn't care if he had a bad day. The value hour happened every day at 6 a.m. before his brain had time to negotiate. He asked me what if he didn't know what to build. I told him to pick the skill that scared him most, because fear is a compass. It points directly at your growth edge, and John's comfort zone had been suffocating him for years. Third, the dopamine budget. John could have his entertainment, but he had to earn it. For every hour of focused work, he got 15 minutes of guilt-free scrolling. That's a 4-to-1 ratio. 4 units of value creation to 1 unit of consumption. Suddenly, TikTok wasn't a black hole, it was a reward.
and rewards only feel good when they're earned. That's basic neuroscience. Unearned dopamine feels hollow. Earned dopamine builds confidence. Fourth, the financial audit dashboard. Every Sunday, John had to update a simple spreadsheet: income, expenses, net worth, time invested in his future, time wasted on his phone. 5 numbers, that's it. Because you can't manage what you don't measure. Now, every week he'd see the truth, and the truth would make him adjust.
Fifth, the identity shift. This was the hardest part. I made John delete a single phrase from his vocabulary: I'm trying. No more I'm trying to save money. Either you saved or you spent. No more I'm trying to wake up early. Either you woke up or you didn't. I asked him who he wanted to be in 12 months. He said he wanted to be someone who was in control, someone who built things, someone who didn't feel ashamed when he checked his bank account. I told him that person already existed. He just needed to prove it to himself 365 times in a row. One day at a time, one choice at a time, one no to comfort and one yes to growth. By the end of day 7, John looked different. Not physically, but energetically. He stood straighter. He made eye contact. He stopped apologizing for taking up space. I asked him what changed. He said something that showed me he got it all. He said, I realized I wasn't broke because I didn't have money. I was broke because I didn't respect myself enough to do hard things. Bingo. That's the fix. Not a hack, not a shortcut, just the uncomfortable truth you've been avoiding. You're not lazy. You're just running a program written by a version of you that was too afraid to bet on yourself. That person is a costume, and it's suffocating the real you.
John didn't need therapy. He needed to stop lying to himself and start running the math. And once he saw the numbers, everything else became obvious. 30 days later, John sent me a screenshot. His side project made its first $1,200. Not life-changing money, but life-proving money. Proof that the new operating system worked. 90 days later, he'd replaced half his salary with freelance income. His bank account had 4 figures instead of 3. But more importantly, his screen time was down to 2 hours a day. And those 2 hours were intentional, not compulsive. He told me the craziest part wasn't the money. It was waking up without dread. It was going to bed knowing he'd actually done something that mattered. It was looking in the mirror and not feeling like a fraud. That's the ROI nobody talks about. Self-respect. Because self-respect makes you do the boring, unsexy things that compound into wealth. And self-loathing makes you scroll until your eyes burn because you can't stand to be alone with your own thoughts. John's not special. He's just a guy who decided to stop negotiating with his excuses. And if he can do it, so can you. But here's the truth that hurts. Most people won't change because most people would rather stay comfortable and broke than uncomfortable and growing. They'll watch this video, feel inspired for 48 hours, and then go right back to their old program. Don't be most people. If you're serious about fixing your financial operating system, I'm going to give you 2 initial steps that work. 1. Comment below, I will improve my financial life. By writing this publicly, you create neural connections that will push you toward the stated goal. 2. Delete social media from your phone for 7 days. That's it. No replacement plan, no strategy. Just remove the drug and see what happens when your brain isn't constantly hijacked. If you can't do this, you're not ready, and that's fine. But stop pretending you want to change. You want to change, and that's not the same thing. I fixed John in 7 days because he was finally ready to be fixed. The question is, are you? Because the audit starts now, and your excuses are already costing you more than you think.
If this content helped you, like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, check out the link in the pinned comment for materials that'll help you improve your financial life. See you in the next one.